Part 141. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1401. However, Manbao still withdrew from the mall. She still wanted to try it herself. It's not that she couldn't cure the prince's disease, and she had only seen the prince's patient with such a serious weak sperm. It is rare for a patient to meet, so it is really impossible to spend points to buy medicines. Everything is based on survival. Keek, who has been silent, threw a quotation in Manbao's mind, forcing her to read the quotation again. Buying a bottle of potion is enough for him to stare at the prince for so many days. Why waste that point? This is what it doesn't say. It speaks a lot more cautiously now, but there is a tacit understanding between it and Manbao. Even if it does not speak, Manbao also understands its meaning. Manbao glanced at the quotation and felt that it made sense, so he was refreshed and full of confidence. She opened the medicine box, took out her own needles, brushed out a few long needles, and was about to ask why Manbao was staring at the prince in a daze when the princess saw that. She swallowed the words and quietly shook her head to one side. I don't know if it was her illusion, but she felt that just now, Zhou Man's whole body had changed. She could feel the happy emotions radiating from her body, and she seemed to be too excited. But the princess felt a little trembling in her heart. The prince had already fallen asleep with his head down, and Manbao asked Eunuch Wu to help him lie down on the couch. When the brazier was warmed up in the house, she untied his clothes and pinned them. Manbao had already made up her mind to keep an eye on the prince when he returned. As long as he showed signs of fighting, she immediately bought a potion for him to drink, and then asked him and the prince to make dolls. It doesn't matter if you can't get a pulse at that time. If it's a big deal, give Keek some points to have it scanned. In short, as long as you are sure that the princess is pregnant, let them know. Manbao only felt that the willows were dark and flowers were bright, and the mood was too good. When the prince was pierced with needles, it was fast and violent. The princess sat on the side and watched her brush the needles on the prince, but there was a rippling smile on her face. She endured. Can't stop shaking. Manbao got the needle, and when he twisted the needle for the first time, the prince couldn't help snoring. Obviously he had fallen asleep. Manbao was stunned when he heard it, and asked, "Your Highness, is your nose bad?" Before the crown princess could speak, Manbao had already twisted a few needles and stabbed him again, and turned his head to smile at the crown princess. "It's okay, this can be cured." The crown princess looked at the newly inserted needles and silently closed her mouth. The prince snored for a while, then slowly stopped, but still fell asleep. Manbao has been sitting in front of the couch guarding him, and when the time is up, she twists the needle once and then pulls out the needle. The prince was still asleep. Manbao touched his pulse and said, "Prince has been insomnia and manic lately. I'm afraid the sleep time will be longer. Take a quilt and cover him and let him sleep slowly." The princess asked, "Dr. Zhou Xiao still enter the palace tomorrow?" After thinking about it, Manbao said, "Come in, I've been working hard for the past 2 days, so I can keep an eye on his condition." At the same time, he also watched the dynamics in the palace. Because of the renewed hope in her heart, the crown princess became more close to Manbao. However, she thought about it for a while, but she still didn't send all the treasures, and she didn't show closeness when she was in front of people. Manbao could feel it, but she didn't say anything. After receiving the acupuncture, she said, "Niang Niang, I heard that your highness forbids us to practice acupuncture in the East Palace. Can we go to another palace?" The crown princess thought that the palace was not very peaceful recently, so she persuaded, "Dr. Zhou has only entered the capital, why don't you take a rest during this time and wait until the spring flowers bloom in a few months?" Manbao nodded. She brought the medicine box and was about to leave when Eunuch Wu bowed in and said in a low voice, "Niang Niang, the Empress has sent someone to pick up Dr. Zhou Xiaodao." Manbao looked at the princess. The princess was also looking at Man Bao, and said in a low voice, "Dr. Zhou, the lady's health is not good, please help to conceal the matter of the prince." Man Bao nodded, and she didn't really want to tell the queen. The queen's body is not as good as the prince's. If she is in a hurry, she will become seriously ill. If she is seriously ill, the prince may even go crazy, so don't tell her. Man Bao followed the palace servants to the queen's palace. During Man Bao's absence, Xiao Yuan was visiting the queen. Now she no longer needs to puncture needles from time to time, and she doesn't even need to take medicine often. She just uses a few medicated meals to condition her body. Her disease is not easy to cure, but she looks good when she is not sick. She summoned Man Bao this time mainly to understand the prince's condition. The prince is very left-minded now, and the imperial doctor in the imperial hospital can't believe it. He only uses Man Bao as a doctor. Even Xiao Yuan is going to the hospital. Although he can check the pulse, he has not received much information. But the queen is smart. Although the prince has avoided her these days, she can still see that the prince is not in a good state. Not only she knew, but even the emperor knew. But the father and son have been quarreling for a while, and the emperor was concerned and unwilling to take the initiative to surrender, so only the queen came to ask. Man Bao couldn't talk about the prince's poisoning, he could only say, "His Royal Highness is under a lot of pressure, so I have been insomnia lately, and I can't help but be a little grumpy." The queen was stunned for a moment. "Is it because of insomnia that you have such a bad temper?" Man Bao nodded. "My lady should know that if you don't sleep well, your temper will be much worse, and your health will also be bad." The imperial physicians would only say that the prince was too worried and his body was hot and dry, but they would not like Zhou Man to point out that he was short-tempered because of insomnia, let alone that he was suffering from insomnia because of excessive stress. She explained it so clearly that the queen didn't know what to ask for a while. Man Bao lowered his head and continued what he had prepared on the road. "As long as the prince has a good rest during this time, the minister walks more often and gives him acupuncture, and he should be able to recover in a few days." The queen breathed a sigh of relief, nodded, and said with a smile, "Dr. Lao Zhou has been running back and forth during this period of time." She said, "Come here, go to the warehouse and take out the box of pearls that the Anton Protector's mansion paid tribute to, and reward the little Dr. Zhou together with the cloth." The queen smiled at Man Bao. "You weren't here during the new year, so the reward prepared for you will be temporarily suppressed. You can take it today. That's the reward given to you by your majesty and I." Man Bao hurriedly knelt down and thanked him, got up and backed out with the people. When she was gone, a person came out from behind the screen. The queen looked at the emperor and asked angrily, "Are you willing to come out?" The emperor touched his nose, sat next to the queen, and asked with frowns, "Where are you going? Why is it so stressful that you have insomnia and irritability?" The queen couldn't help pinching him and said sadly, "This year is the 6th year of his marriage, and he doesn't have a single child. Those people in the court are inquiring about changing the prince every 3 days. He is under pressure. Can it be big?" Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1402. The emperor said, "When I was in the secret residence, not only was the first prince suspicious, but his majesty and the ministers in the court also suppressed me a lot. The family could not wait to send assassins to kill me for the third child. Didn't I survive? How did you make it through?" The words turned around on the tip of the queen's tongue, but she didn't say anything. How did the emperor survive? Thousands of miles back, he killed the third prince who was fighting with him, forcing the late emperor to make him the crown prince. When she said it, did she imply that the prince also meant the same thing? And it just so happened that the third prince who was competing with the prince at this time was also her son. The queen only felt that it was an injustice, clutching her chest and being speechless. The emperor hurriedly rubbed her chest and said, "Don't be angry, I will send old man Wang away from afar, and prevent him from making trouble for Dalan in the capital. The Queen sighed, it's useless. Without Lord Wang, Lord Zhang, and Lord Lu, many people have opinions. If Dalan is not a prince, just an ordinary prince, who among the ministers cares whether he can have children? It's good to be able to give birth, but it's fine to be unable to give birth, and it's fine to adopt one from the clan. But he is the prince, and the ministers cannot ignore it. He is the foundation of the country. If the prince of a country does not have his own children, the country will be in turmoil in the future. The Queen knew their minds too well. Even, she sees it better than everyone else. In the final analysis, the prince's heart is not stable enough. The Queen wiped away her tears. If he had the forbearance and courage of the emperor, he would still be as humble and courteous as before, and he would not lose his sense of proportion. Even if he had no children, everyone would at most criticize him. Important officials like Wei Ji would still stand by him side to maintain orthodoxy. Even now, because of these many blows, he has a bad temper, scolded people, and fought with his younger brother. Even important officials such as Wei Ji and Tang Hui suggested that the emperor should appoint another prince, but the two emperors still did not give up on him. The emperor gritted his teeth to not abolish the crown prince. Both husband and wife know that it is safe to abolish the prince in the world, and to abolish him is equivalent to killing him. What the Queen complained about was that the emperor should not dote on the third prince so much that the third prince and other people had thoughts that they should not have. In the first 2 years, although the crown prince was criticized because he had no heirs, he was still good and basically stable. But since the third child participated in the struggle for the heir, more and more people attacked the prince in the DPRK, and he slowly lost his sense of proportion. The emperor felt that the prince was going to be the emperor in the future. He couldn't handle such trivial matters. How could he bear the burden of the whole country in the future? The north is uneven and the family is unruly. Do you think that he only needs to sit on the dragon chair as a mascot when he succeeds to the throne? Moreover, he gave him the whole world. The third child and his mother and compatriot are equally smart and clever, but they only have a small fief. Why does he love him more? However, the third child was indeed too much. He knew that the prince could not drink alcohol, but he changed his drink. Thinking of this, the emperor was so angry that his beard blew out. The Queen also remembered this, and frowned tightly and asked, "How is the investigation into the exchange of the prince's wine at the state banquet?" The emperor said to him, "The person who changed the wine is dead, and it will be difficult to investigate the next time. I have asked Gu Zhong to investigate." "Why did you ask Gu Zhong to check?" The Queen knew that there was something tricky when she heard it, and couldn't help but slapped him lightly. "Tell me honestly, did you find something?" The emperor murmured and refused to speak. The Queen looked helpless. "You didn't find out about the third child, did you?" The emperor was silent. The Queen said, "That's not what the third child did." The emperor was refreshed and immediately asked, "Do you know who Zitong is?" "I don't know, but I know it's not the third child," the Queen said. "Before you let the third child leave the capital, he came to the palace to cry for me. He said it wasn't him who did it, and he didn't know, he was wronged." The emperor couldn't help muttering, "He said it wasn't him, so you believed it?" "I believe," the Queen glanced at him and said, "if he did it, he wouldn't dare to come to see me. After what happened to Mrs. Lu in the East Palace, I called him to see me, but he didn't dare to come to see me. He really did it, how dare he come to the palace to cry for me this time?" The Queen hated that iron was not steel. "Your Majesty, you have treated the prince badly, but you can't wrong another child. The relationship between their brothers is so bad, you..." The Queen suppressed her malicious words and turned her head to the side angrily. The emperor heard her unfinished words, and couldn't help but get angry. "So, this matter is still my own, isn't it?" The Queen bowed her head and said nothing. The emperor got up in anger, turned around twice, couldn't help but kick the pillar next to him. His strength was not right, and the toes hurt, and the emperor couldn't help hissing. The queen was angry and aggrieved. She stepped forward to support him and said, "It's your fault, why are you angry with me? Go up and ask, why are those people making trouble with Saburo and Dalan? It's not for the sake of a congruent dragon. From Long Jigong, look at the veterans who fought with you on the battlefield now, how many people want this glory and wealth? I persuaded you a long time ago, and Wei Ji and the others did not hesitate. Have you heard it? You deserved it in person, but turned around and forgot." The emperor said, "Sanlang is also your son. Don't I love him?" The queen couldn't help crying. "The beloved son of his parents has far-reaching plans. You just dote on him for his own good. You spoil them and love them. Look at how you spoil them, what are you used to?" The queen's tears fell drop by drop, and she choked up. How much better their brothers were before? If it weren't for you they are too spoiled, and the two brothers can't help each other, and they won't become enemies like they are now. Both of them are her sons, and now they have the same cross-eyed eyes, and they wish to kill each other instead. Isn't she the mother who is the saddest? When the emperor saw the queen crying, he was in a hurry, and he didn't care that the toes were still hurting. He quickly wiped her tears and admitted the mistake, and promised to never spoil Saburo again. The queen cried for a while, wiped away her tears, and brought the topic back. "You should check the matter of changing the wine carefully. If it is not good to hand it over to the Ministry of Punishment, then let Yin Li investigate. Handing it over to the Ministry of Punishment is to analyze it under the court. If the emperor has concerns, he can hand it over to Jingzhe Yin." Yin Li was the emperor's confidant, and the Jingzhou mansion was under his control, and he quietly checked. The queen had doubts in her heart, but she couldn't say it to mislead the emperor. She only said, "No matter if it is found out that Saburo did it in the end, the justice that should be given to Dalan must be given." The queen was crying, and the emperor naturally answered whatever she said. He nodded again and said while wiping her tears, "I listen to you, don't cry, you cry so much that my heart hurts to death. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1403. Hearing the words, the queen couldn't help but glance at him angrily, and said with a blushing face, "You're already old, what did you say?" The emperor held her hand and said, "To be honest, the imperial doctor said that you should not think too much. In the future, leave these things to me. Don't worry about it. I was bad before, so I shouldn't be angry with you." The queen slowly told him to coax him, and forgave him with a sigh. The husband and wife went to have afternoon tea together, and after a while, the emperor went to the front hall to handle government affairs. After thinking about it, he still asked someone to call Yin Li into the palace. At the state banquet on the third day of the third day, the prince's drink was changed. "I'll leave it to you to investigate. Yin Li, it's been half a month, and the damned people are all dead, where did he go to find out?" The emperor coughed lightly, pointed to Gu Zhong and said, "Gu Zhong was investigating these things before, just ask him what you want." Gu Zhong. The emperor said solemnly, "No matter who ordered this matter, you must find out." Yin Li understood, and bowed in response. Gu Zhong then handed over to Yin Li. Previously, the emperor hinted not to investigate halfway through the investigation. Gu Zhong was fishing for a while. Now the emperor wants to pursue it again. When he turned around, he found that many evidences were wiped clean. Yin Li had a headache, and after thinking about it, he said, "I have to borrow someone from your majesty." Emperor, who? You can say it. Master Tang, the chief of the imperial censors. Emperor. He said, "I king, Tang Minghui is one level higher than you. By borrowing him, is he listening to you, or are you listening to him? Yen Li continued, Old Master Tang's son Tang He. The emperor raised his eyebrows slightly and nodded, okay, here it is. Gu Zhong, prepare a handwritten letter. Gu Zhong responded and went to write the edict respectfully. The queen gave Manbao a lot of things, so the people in the palace used 2 cars to send the things and people back to Changqing Lane. The palace servant moved things into the backyard, took a purse from Baishansai, and left. The 3 heads were the first time they saw the people in the palace, and the first time they saw the rewards in the palace, so they couldn't help staring curiously. As soon as the people left, they looked around the presents. Manbao opened a box, and inside was a pair of golden monkeys. Mainly, this pair of monkeys is quite big, and Manbao is heavy in his hand. With a wow from everyone, Santu couldn't help but take a bite, and then affirmed, it's true. Bai Shan, the reward given by the palace is of course true. The cloth this time was also very expensive. Probably because the weather was still cold during the Chinese New Year, the queen gave her 2 fox furs. Manbao put everything in the room, and then opened another box. As soon as it was opened, everyone's eyes were flashed, and even Mr. Zhuang couldn't help but be surprised. Inside the box, plump and round pearls slipped gently, each pearl being almost the same size and roundness. Manbao gave a soft wow, and then looked at Mr. Zhuang. Mr. Zhuang has recovered, stroked his beard and said with a smile, since it is the queen's reward, you can continue. Sanya couldn't help swallowing her saliva, and asked, little aunt, if I learn very powerful medical skills, will I be able to get such a reward in the future? Manbao encouraged her, it should be possible. Sanya became ambitious, and the ambition in her heart rose to the top. She secretly encouraged herself, in the future, I will be as good as my sister-in-law now, and make a lot of money. Everyone moved things back to Manbao's room, and Bai Shan stayed on the grounds that he had something to discuss with Manbao. Today, Mr. Zhuang inspected their homework and thought that both Zhou Lixiu and Zhou Lego's study were a little dangerous, so he had already started to assign and guide their homework. The 3 heads reluctantly left and went back to the study to do their homework and read. Bai Shan asked Manbao, have you had lunch? Manbao nodded, eat in the East Palace. The prince's poison has been detoxified. Manbao nodded, the antidote is very good. After the poison is detoxified, some genes can be repaired. Ahem, it has the effect of strengthening one's roots and cultivating vitality. Bai Shan asked in a low voice, did you see any clues when you entered the palace today? Manbao shook his head. Where's Uncle Joe? Manbao said, I'll ask him later. Then watch him stop moving. Bai Shan looked back at her innocently. Manbao said, you have to go out. Bai Shan also reluctantly got up, can't you ask in front of me? Manbao shook her head, although she could see the videos in the system even if she was immersed in consciousness, but she preferred to go in and watch it, which would consume less energy. Bai Shan could only turn around and go out. After he left, Manbao stretched, took off his shoes and socks, and climbed onto the bed, and then happily entered the system to watch the video. To be honest, she was still very interested in what the prince was doing on weekdays. While watching yesterday's video, Manbao glanced at the remaining points paid out, and didn't go to bargain with Keek, I don't need to record when I see a doctor for the prince, remember to postpone the time. Keek, host, this is not in compliance with the rules and regulations, there is no delay function at present, if you don't record, the points already collected will not be refunded. To collect. Manbao. Manbao felt that the current Keek was not considerate at all. But she no longer bargained, and now both of them are stared at, and bargaining is not fun, and it is easy to reveal the truth. As for what to reveal, Manbao doesn't have that awareness yet. Anyway, he just knows not to act too close to Keek. Man Bao clicked on yesterday's video. The video was recorded when the prince left the East Palace and went to the Taiji Palace to go to court. The front hall of the Taiji Palace was also within the scanning range of Keek. Unfortunately, it was not within the scope of the emperor's bedroom and the palace behind. Man Bao's eyes widened as he watched the scene of the court ceremony. All the people within 10 meters of the prince were recorded, and the sound he heard was basically recorded by the system. So, Man Bao learned that there was a snow disaster in Taiyuan. Although it was already spring, the north of the Yellow River was still very cold. The days in Lanzhou Road this year were very unsightly. It is still snowing heavily, and many herdsmen's cattle and sheep were frozen to death. The treasury had to allocate some money and grain for disaster relief, otherwise the northern tribes that had been pacified would most likely go south to loot, and Lanzhou would not be peaceful. Man Bao also knew that the concubine's wife's family in Jiangju killed someone while fighting for land in Jiangju. In order to have a good New Year before, this matter was temporarily suppressed, but now that the Lantern Festival is over, the censor brought this matter up again, thinking that it should be brought to trial for the provincial governor of Qingzhou. But Wei Ji believes that the matter has not been investigated clearly, and he can investigate again and arraign again. The censor station believed that Wei Ji was avenging his personal revenge, and the governor of Jiangju was locked in the prison temple outside the city again, and he was afraid that he would freeze to death before he was brought to trial. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1404. Then Li Shangshu of the Ministry of War cried out in poverty, asking for money, weapons, and clothes for the soldiers and emperors guarding the border. The Ministry of Industry also mentioned that the Yellow River should be dredged. Last year, the area of Shenzhou was dry. This year, there may be more rain. Unfortunately, Shenzhou is at the turning point of the Yellow River. This place is so unfortunate. The Yellow River turns a 90-degree bend here, and the river is very anxious, just like a roaring tigress. When there is not much rain, everyone is worried, and when there is a lot of rain, everyone is even more worried. Therefore, in order to reduce losses, Shenzhou should consolidate the embankment, and the further downstream should be dredged, otherwise too much sediment will accumulate, and if there is too much rain above, the downstream will be finished. These two items required a lot of money, so everyone quarreled, and the emperor asked the prince for his opinion. The prince thought that the Ministry of War could temporarily reduce the use of items for the Ministry of Industry, and focus on the use of the Ministry of Industry. Qin Tianjian also said that this year there will be more rain in the Yellow River area. After this matter was discussed, Eunuch Wu and the matter of Lord Wang's remonstrance that she had mentioned in the morning. Lord Wang mentioned that the princess had no heir, and suggested that the East Palace should re-enroll Yang Di. Man Bao saw the prince's face in the video gloomy at a speed visible to the naked eye. The video recorded by Keek is very clear, so clear that Man Bao can see the pores of the prince, so as soon as he sank his face Man Bao saw that his expression became violent. However, he restrained himself and did not lose his temper directly. Although in the end there was still an unhappy fight, but fortunately there was no fight. Man Bao said while watching the video, "If I were the crown prince, I would tell His Majesty directly that the direct daughter of Lord Wang would be accepted into the palace, and whichever daughter he likes the most will be accepted, whether he mentions it or not." Coco didn't speak. A morning looked down, and there was a knock on the door. Man Bao went to open the door, and Bai Shan said, "After dinner, what are you doing in the house? It took so long to open the door." Man Bao stared, "So fast. I feel like she just watched the video." Looking back on it, Man Bao felt that watching the prince's video was much more fun than watching the class video in the teaching room, and the time passed so quickly. After reading it, Man Bao wanted to communicate with others, but the whole family could only talk to Bai Shan about such a thing, so after the meal, the two of them went to the small garden under the pretext of watering the flowers to harm the flowers, plants, and trees. Man Bao vividly recounted what she had just watched Zhao. She has a good memory, and she can basically repeat whoever said what in the video. When it came to that Lord Wang, Man Bao told Bai Shan his idea and said, in the end, the prince is still not shameless enough. Bai Shan turned his head and looked at her quietly. Seeing that he was watching her not moving, Man Bao touched his face and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's a coincidence, the prince did such a thing 2 years ago. At that time, there was a Lu Yishi who impeached the prince like this. The prince thought he was justified, and the next day he asked the princess to bring Liu's daughter into the palace. Already," Bai Shan said, "the Lu family who was pregnant last year but did not save the fetus is the daughter of that Lu Yishi." Man Bao. She couldn't help but conspiracy theory, "It won't be." "No," Bai Shan said, "actually, the crown prince doesn't care about Liu's daughter at all. Although he was annoyed by Lu Yishi's revelation, he forgot about it afterward. The thing is, Mrs. Lu is also virtuous, marrying a chicken and following a chicken, no, marrying a dragon and following a dragon, and being obedient and obedient. She didn't save the fetus. Someone whispered in her ear that the prince concubine harmed her. She knew it was not. She thought it was because she didn't protect the prince and the prince concubine's children, so she committed suicide by hanging herself in guilt." Man Bao was stunned. "There are people like this in the world." "No, how did you know?" Feng Zonping said. Bai Shan said, "This case was investigated by Feng Shangzhu. Once the case came out, the third prince was most suspected, followed by the crown princess and Lu Shi himself. After investigation, it was found that the third prince had someone to do it. But there is still a matter for the king of Yizhou here. Feng Shangzhu couldn't find out at first, but then the case of the king of Yizhou was found, and this old case was turned over. Feng Zonping told us privately. Man Bao didn't expect the prince to actually do such a shameless thing, so he asked with a light cough, then. Master Wang only has 2 daughters. Unfortunately, they are both married, and they can go to the street to buy candy. Bai Shan knew what she wanted to ask at a glance. Man Bao was amazed. "How did you know this?" After thinking for a while, Bai Shan shook his head and said, "I don't remember which classmate in school said that the son of Lord Wang's son would not be able to enter the Imperial College in the future, and then I found out." Man Bao was dizzy and didn't understand how his grandson involved his daughter. Bai Shan asked, "Did Uncle Joe say anything happened to the prince yesterday?" Man Bao said, "I just finished listening to him in the morning, and I haven't had time to ask anything else." Bai Shan, "Did you hear too much detail?" Man Bao whispered, "Speak out and scare you to death, I just watched them in the morning." Bai Shan thought thoughtfully, "Uncle Joe can't tell you the prince's change directly, you have to see it yourself." Man Bao paused, looked at him with round eyes, and stopped talking. Bai Shan understood, and lowered his voice and asked, "Then what you're watching is still a reproduction? Isn't this the same as the mirage written in the book?" Man Bao nodded again and again, but she couldn't say anything. Keek couldn't help but warn her, "Host, please pay attention to your words." Man Bao blinked and did nothing. Seeing that her eyes were sparkling, Bai Shan stopped her head in the middle of nodding, and he couldn't help but ponder. The two looked at each other silently for a while, and finally turned around and went back without saying anything. Bai Erlang was bored in the study, so he made an excuse to come out to get some air, and turned around to see the two returning from the small garden side by side in the dark night. He couldn't help but look up at the sky. "You water flowers until is it dark?" Santu, who also used the same excuse to go to the toilet, passed by and gave Bai Erlang a contemptuous look. "Where are the flowers in the garden at the moment? Do you believe what they say?" Bai Shan looked at him and said, "Santu, if there is anything you don't understand about the homework assigned by the teacher, you can ask me." Santu froze all over, shook and ran away. "There is nothing I don't understand, I will do it all." Bai Shan then raised his voice, "That's right, I'll ask Mister to give you a more advanced course. Santu stumbled 2 steps with a snap, almost falling to the ground. Bai Erlang was happy. Man Bao ignored them and went back to the house to continue watching the video. Bai Shan reminded her that although watching the prince's daily life was fun, she could still use a book to do both. But it took too much time. After all, this is the prince's day. At the same speed, it would take a whole day for her to read it. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1405. After entering the system, Man Bao asked, Keek, did the prince mention treason, starting, etc. yesterday? Please watch the host yourself. Man Bao scratched his head and asked, is there no way? Please host to explore on your own. Man Bao lucked out and felt that being stared at by people or the system was not fun at all, and Keek was no longer like Keek. Man Bao reached out and poked at the video, helplessly fast-forwarded a little bit like reviewing the class video before, and found that she had indeed skipped a section, and she sighed. Looking at it this way, it is easy to lose something. Man Bao turned out a blank book, intending to write down the time she had read, and then go back and fill in the gaps later when she was free. There is a blank space in the middle of the video, which is basically because the prince left the scanning range of Keek, so it was not recorded. But the time of the black screen also appeared, and Man Bao skipped directly. She probably knew that yesterday the prince went to the small study with the emperor after the morning, and she didn't know where to go after that. He didn't return to the East Palace until afternoon. There are also many things in the East Palace waiting for the prince to handle. Man Bao yawned with his head supported, listening to the prince and the officials of the East Palace handling all kinds of messy government affairs. Just when she was about to fall asleep, the prince suddenly got up and went for a small walk study. Man Bao lifted his eyelids and glanced at it, then continued to prop up his cheeks and pricked his ears to listen to the movement. Suddenly, the prince's deep voice came, have you found it? There are 3 groups of people who are staring at Zhou Man. Outside the alley, the people who are staring at the princess's family and the people of the Duke of Pai, but they have nothing to do with them. There is also a group of people who rented a small house in Changqing Lane. The house is separated from the Zhou family by 2 houses, and the news sent out was quietly sent to the secret post that Prince Gong left in the capital. Man Bao's eyes widened with a swipe, and he immediately looked closer. He saw the prince sitting in a dimly lit small study room, with a man kneeling down in the hall. Although he couldn't see his face, Man Bao's memory was always good. She had never seen this person in terms of body or voice. The prince asked, where is the other group? The man lowered his head and said in a low voice, there is also a group of people monitoring the 3-story high-rise building a street away from Zhou's house. According to His Highness's instructions, all dangerous ones will be removed, so they are killed in a humble position. Our people followed the letter sent out, and finally passed it to the Duke's mansion. The prince was slightly surprised, and he couldn't help but sit up straight and asked, who? The man lowered his head and said in a low voice, go to the house of the Marquis of Ziuyu. The prince frowned and asked, why is he staring at Zhou Man? The kneeling man did not answer. The prince pondered for a while and then asked, how can you be sure that they are malicious towards Zhou Man? Feel. The prince did not object to his feelings. This was his secret guard, and he never underestimated the feeling of those who wandered between life and death. The prince touched his chin and said, the Su family is justified in staring at Zhou Man, after all she is treating the orphan. Always be careful if anyone contacts Zhou Man and harms the orphan through her. What is Zhou Yahao for? The prince pondered for a moment and said, let people stare at the 3rd child, as long as they don't make a move, don't startle the snake. Let someone check what happened to Zhou Yahao. Did he vote for the old man when he didn't know? 3. The man responded, and then bowed and stepped back. Man Bao, who was staring at them in the system, was stunned, and after a while, he touched his chest and was still startled, So many people staring at me. As usual, Keek would definitely reply to her, did you know? But it said nothing at the moment. Manbao didn't expect it to answer, and after thinking for a while, he said, what is the prince doing now? Keek broadcasts the prince's dynamic for her in real time. The prince was sleeping, and the princess was with him. It seemed that he had been asleep since she left in the afternoon. When Manbao was watching the video, the crown princess was pushing him carefully, as if she wanted to wake him up. The prince turned over and continued to sleep with the quilt in his arms. Only then did the crown princess breathe a sigh of relief, and she probably knew that he was exhausted and would not bother him anymore. Manbao muttered, I slept long enough. She slid forward, but didn't find anything special. She was sleeping the whole time. She sighed and let Keek continue to stare. She backed out and yawned while holding the quilt. Stand up. When Manbao entered the palace the next day, he found out that the prince had slept all night until this morning, and did not even go to the early morning. When she arrived at the East Palace, the crown prince was sitting cross-legged on the couch having breakfast. He looked calm. When he saw Manbao, he raised his eyelids to look at her, then waved his hand to avoid her salute, and then lowered his head a few times to nibble on the steamed bun. The crown princess sat on the side, and after giving Manbao a seat, she explained, the crown prince didn't have lunch and dinner yesterday. He has been sleeping until now. He is very hungry. Please ask Dr. Zhou to wait for a while. Manbao naturally had no problem at all. After the prince had breakfast, she also talked to them for a while, and it took 3/4 of an hour before she gave him a pulse. By the way, she also looked at the princess and nodded slightly when she knew that she had started to use her medicine. It is said that the treatment and conditioning process for both of them went well. The prince took off his clothes and lay on the couch, asking, is the solitary poison really cured? Manbao nodded affirmatively, all solved. The prince said, you still have some skills. Manbao, nonsense, no ability, will she become his exclusive doctor? Manbao had pierced the prince, and just like yesterday, he did not leave the palace until he had lunch in the East Palace. As soon as she arrived at the gate of the palace, she saw Dr. Lu waiting by the side, and when she saw her, she looked at her expectantly, with a little excitement on her face. Manbao nodded to Eunuch Wu, who was sending her off, stepped forward and said to Lu Yi's daughter, tomorrow I will start going to Ji Shitang. You and the queen have mentioned it? Come out of the palace and learn with me. Dr. Lu breathed a sigh of relief, hurriedly bowed in response, and watched Manbao leave. Manbao returned to Changqing Lane, and Bai Shan said to her, today, my husband and I went to see 2 more academies, and we went over and over again, but I still think Songhe Academy is the best. Manbao tilted his head and said, this name sounds a little familiar. Bai Shan smiled and said, you forgot, Mr. Zhang used to be a mountain chief at Songhe Academy. This academy was opened by one of his cousins. Songhe Academy has the most collection of Mr. Jiang's words. Ah, when you said that, I remembered that it belongs to the outer city. It's in the outer city, but it's not far from Changqing Lane. After leaving Fangkou and turning a corner, it's on the same street as your restaurant, but one is in the east and the other is in the west. It's lively over there and here secluded, we have seen it, the environment is not bad, mainly because the gentlemen inside are not bad. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1406. He smiled and said, Mr. took us to the door today. He and several gentlemen drank tea for a long time and made friends. Those who can be friends with Mr. are generally not that bad. Manbao was overjoyed and immediately said, then choose Songhe Academy. Being repair is not cheap, Your fifth brother thinks it is too expensive. It's called sharpening the knife without mistake. They are all blunt knives now. They spend a little more money to sharpen the knives. How much money can they make in the future? Man Bao waved his hand generously. Looking back, I told the fifth brother to let him pay the money. Bai Shan nodded with a smile. The academy is not in a hurry to start school, and will continue to enroll students until the 27th day of the first lunar month. We will go to class tomorrow. Man Bao said, tomorrow I will also go to Ji Shitang. I will go to the fifth brother in the afternoon. Aren't you going to enter the palace tomorrow? Man Bao shook his head. The next day, the prince's condition is much more stable today. She winked with Bai Shan and said, my temper has improved a lot. Bai Shan pursed his lips and nodded. Then you go, remember to come to us after school. I guess Yin or they will clean up the dust for us, then you can call them all three, and let them they make friends. Man Bao nodded. After the two of them finished talking, one went back to the study to arrange tomorrow's affairs, the other went back to his room to rummage for things, and after a while, Man Bao took the things back to the study, and said to Sanya, get up early tomorrow, and let's go to the pharmacy together. Zhou Liru was still a little nervous, and his heart skipped a beat. Little aunt, am I going to start studying medicine with you? Man Bao nodded. You have no foundation, so you just memorized some herbs. Tomorrow I will take you to recognize the herbs you memorized, and the rest are not in a hurry to learn. Sanya clutched her chest and said, little aunt, I'm so nervous. When Man Bao studied medicine, it was logical and she didn't seem to be nervous, so she couldn't empathize with her, so she patted her shoulder and said, then how nervous you are, let's finish the nervousness tomorrow, and you won't be nervous tomorrow. Already. Zhou Liru. Crowd. Mr. Zhuang stroked his forehead, put down the book and called, Man Bao. Man Bao immediately got up and walked obediently to Mr. Mr. Zhuang asked her, do you have a plan for these 2 days? There were too many plans. Man Bao lowered his head and said, sir, I haven't finished writing the medical booklet. I have to continue writing it. I want to write it all in 5 days. Mr. Zhuang nodded. Man Bao lowered his head and continued, tomorrow morning, I will go to Ji Shitang, go to fifth brother at noon to set up Lixia's school, go to see a few friends in the afternoon, and will enter the palace the day after tomorrow. After leaving the palace, it should be evening. Hearing this, Mr. Zhuang raised his eyebrows and asked, then what time do you spend studying? Man Bao looked at Mr. Zhuang with a distressed expression. Mr. Zhuang said, Man Bao, you are still young, and it's not the time to make a fortune. You just said that sharpening your knives is not the same as chopping wood. You need more time to study. He said, you have to choose. Man Bao slumped his shoulders and responded in a low voice. Mr. Zhuang said, go ahead and think again, what can be given up and what can't be given up. After thinking about it for a long time, Man Bao still couldn't figure out what she could give up, so she couldn't help but look at Bai Shan who was sitting beside her. Bai Shan lowered his voice and said, Ji Shitang. Man Bao frowned, but Ji Shitang was where she accumulated experience, if she didn't sit in the hall. Bai Shan glanced at Mr. Zhuang secretly, and seeing that he was not paying attention, he lowered his voice and said, since you are unwilling to give up those palace servants in the palace, and they are more able to listen to your words and train your students, why would you still how about watching some common diseases that you are already familiar with in the Ji Shitang? Man Bao whispered, in the future, Dr. Lu and the others will also look at these common diseases. It's time to go to the sitting hall. Man Bao didn't expect Bai Shan to be more shameless than himself, so he didn't suppress his voice for a while. Is this too utilitarian? Cough cough. Mr. Zhuang looked up at them. The two immediately put their heads down and blocked the front with a book, although they knew that the effect might not be very good. Bai Erlang turned his head and glanced in the air, and he laughed twice in Schadenfreude. After waiting for a while, They felt that the husband was not looking at them, and the two raised their heads and continued to whisper. Bai Shan whispered, "What is utilitarian? Isn't Xiao Xiao by your side? He is from the Zheng family, and you taught him everything you taught Lu Yunu, and he is your apprentice, just like your apprentice. Your relationship is here, and you can't get rid of it at all." He said, "The Zheng family has such a large family business that there is only one imperial physician, and although you are not an imperial physician now, you are better than an imperial physician. You are sitting in the hall of Ji Shitang, and the prescription prescribed by the doctor is also in the medicine cabinet of Ji Shitang. The relationship cannot be broken at all, and shopkeeper Zhengde will not let this relationship be broken. She and Ji Shitang have always had a mutually beneficial relationship. She is not suitable for sitting in Ji Shitang at this stage. If she forces herself to sit in the hall, not only will she waste her time, but there may be a rift between the two." Bai Shandao, Mr. S words are clear enough. You are still young and you don't need to earn money. The most important thing for you is to study. You have seen this common disease for 2 years, and the accumulated experience is enough. If you have a disease that you are not good at, go to study. I think the shopkeeper Zhengde will agree. Man Bao pondered. Of course, the shopkeeper Zheng agreed. Not only did he agree, he also called his son, took Man Bao's hand and said with a smile, "Originally, if you didn't mention it, I would be embarrassed to mention it, since you mentioned it, I also let go." He said, "You are indeed still young, you can't always stay up late to do things, but this is sitting in the hall, going to the doctor, and going to the palace to see the nobles, and it is too busy. I look at it and feel distressed." Hi. Man Bao, this is the most painful thing for her, why do you want to poke her heart? Shopkeeper Zhengde continued, "What's more, you still have to take Dr. Lu and the others, so I am worried about you. So I thought about it, I will keep this clinic for you, if you are free, or you need to give it to the disciples. Practice your hands, then come back and sit for 2 days, as long as you leave the medicine cabinet of our Ji Shitang, I will send you the monthly payment of 5 taels per month as usual." When Man Bao heard this, he felt very embarrassed, and he opened his mouth to refuse. But the shopkeeper Zhengde held her hand and said, "Don't say no, this is all a rule, you take the medical fee for your visit, and the medicine from our Ji Shitang is fine. By the way, my son, you too. Take it with you." He smiled and said, "He is old enough. Originally, he only learned a little bit of medical skills from me, but he is quite clever. Whether he is in the palace or brought to the back house, he can take care of it for you." Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1407. Man Bao opened his mouth wide and said with a half sound, "That little peony. Hey, 1 sheep is kept, and 2 sheep are also kept. 3 sheep can still have companions together, right?" Manager Zheng said with a smile, "Dr. Zhou, when you teach Lu Yi's daughter, let them just listen to the 2 by the side." It was only now that Man Bao understood what Bai Shan said, that she and Ji Shitang could not be separated. She looked at the shopkeeper Xiao Zheng on the side, then at Sanya who was following her, nodded, but still asked, "The medicine cabinet?" "It's okay, give the medicine cabinet to my nephew, he will come over tomorrow, my son will be your apprentice from now on, you can do whatever you want." Shopkeeper Xiao Zheng smiled at Man Bao and said with a smile, "In the future, I will ask Dr. Zhou Xiao for more advice." Man Bao looked at him for a while, then smiled and said, "You're welcome." She turned around and pulled up Sanya, who was following behind her, and introduced to shopkeeper Zhengde with a smile, "Boss, this is my own niece, Zhou Liru, Liru, call someone quickly." Zhou Liru immediately bowed and saluted, "Big shopkeeper, little shopkeeper." Man Bao said, "Don't call the little shopkeeper, call it the big brother." She said to the father and son, "Shopkeeper Zhengde, my niece has come out of school, and the family was worried that I was outside, so she asked her to study medicine with me, but she only memorized herbs and didn't know how to recognize it yet, so I wanted to let her go. Learn for a while in a pharmacy. Otherwise, how much would she have to spend to buy so many herbs for her to recognize? Not to mention that there are still differences in quality between medicinal materials, as well as counterfeit medicines. There's no better place to learn than in a drugstore. Manager Zheng De. Zhou Liru waited for his sister-in-law to finish speaking, and he bowed to the shopkeeper Xiao Zheng again, and called out senior brother in a kindly manner. Shopkeeper Xiao Zheng. Shopkeeper Zheng De was the first to react, nodding with a smile. His eyes could only see a crack, and he said happily, "Don't worry about this, little Dr. Zhou, you just put people in the pharmacy, we will teach you with all our heart, you can leave it alone." 100 hearts. Man Bao also laughed, one big and one small, one tall and one short, looking at each other and smiling, his eyebrows and eyes curled up. Shopkeeper Xiao Zheng looked at his father and then at Dr. Zhou Xiao, and always felt that he saw two foxes, big and small. He touched his nose and looked helplessly at Zhou Liru, his little junior sister, always felt that his seniority was getting lower and lower. By the way, when Zhou Man first entered the pharmacy, they were the same generation, right? The two sides agreed on a new way of cooperation, and Man Bao would take Zhou Liru to the clinic to experience the atmosphere of sitting in the office. In fact, it was to show off and let her feel the might of the ant. As a result, he turned around and saw Xiao Xiao carrying a basket of medicinal materials from outside. The two of them were very happy when they met. Xiao Xiao put down the medicine basket and took out a bag from her arms and said, "Dr. Zhou, this was delivered to our house by a medicine dealer yesterday, saying that it was collected by a medicine farmer in the wild. Seeds, I don't know if they are useful." Man Bao took it and asked, "What kind of seeds?" "Huangjing seeds," he said, "this thing is usually dug wild, and few people will collect its seeds, but you said that you want to try growing the medicinal materials yourself, so as to study the raw medicinal materials." The medicinal farmer looked at and collected some last year, it was only delivered this year through the hands of a drug dealer. Man Bao became happy and decided to collect a few seeds for Keek when she went back, and she also tried to plant them herself. Man Bao introduced Xiao Xiao to Zhou Liru. "This is Xiao Xiao, it's called." Man Bao scratched his head, "Third senior brother?" "Xiao Xiao, this is my niece Li Ru, who will follow me to study medicine in the future." Zhou Liru immediately bowed to Xiao Xiao and called out, "Hello, third senior brother." Xiao Xiao was stunned by the name. He was only an apprentice, and he was not qualified to pour tea for Man Bao as a teacher. Ordinarily, her current apprentice was only Lu Yunu, and he was a piggyback. No, this doesn't seem to be the most important thing. The most important thing is that if he is the third senior brother and the senior sister is Lu Yi's daughter, who is the second child? Xiao Xiao wondered, was she Dr. Xiao? Before he had time to figure it out, the shopkeeper Zheng De, who saw that he was stunned and didn't know how to seize the opportunity, couldn't help but slap him on the forehead and shouted, "What are you doing? Don't hurry up and kowtow to your master, your junior sister called you, you should." When Xiao Xiao woke up, she immediately bowed her hands and called master at Zhou Liru. As soon as she looked up, she realized that something was wrong, so she turned around halfway, and saluted at Man Bao again and called, "Master." Then he turned around and saluted and called Zhou Liru junior sister. Shopkeeper Zheng De twitched the corners of his mouth. Before, he chose Zheng Xiao only because he was honest, loyal, and tight-lipped, and he was a member of their Zheng family, but he didn't think that he was too honest. He still wanted to wait for him to ask who the senior brother and senior sister above him were, but after salute he stepped aside respectfully and became happy. The shopkeeper Zheng De was so angry that he could only ask the topic by himself, "Dr. Zhou, will Dr. Lu come over later?" Man Bao nodded, I guess it's coming soon. They came early today. The pharmacy had just opened to bring in new medicinal materials. The guy was still cleaning the lobby. After cleaning, the door was opened to welcome guests. By then, Dr. Ding and the others would almost come. Today Man Bao wanted to bring Zhou Liru to get used to it, so he arrived 2 quarters earlier. And today is just 10 days. Usually, when the pharmacy has fresh medicinal materials, it is also the time when Man Bao is taking a rest. The shopkeeper Zheng and the shop staff have to open the door 2 quarters earlier to check the medicinal materials. Shopkeeper Zheng doesn't have time to deal with the new herbs now, so he put all his energy on Man Bao, and said with a smile, "Since it happened so well today, why don't you wait for Dr. Ding and the others to bear witness when they come, and let a few children give it to him? Do you kowtow to tea?" Taller, stronger, and older than Man Bao, the manager Xiao Zheng, who was originally on an equal footing with her, couldn't help but touch her nose. Man Bao didn't have any opinion. She would point to the shopkeeper Zheng to take care of Sanya in the future. There are many medicinal herbs that are so precious that apprentices who have only been in the door for 2 or 3 years are not qualified to touch them. But she obviously didn't plan to make Sanya wait 2 or 3 years. Seeing her nodding, shopkeeper Zhengde was also very happy. As soon as the name is settled, his son will learn medicine from Man Bao as soon as possible. He originally wanted to rely on Zheng Xiao and the drugstore to maintain the relationship between the two sides, but Zhou Man's ability far exceeded his expectations, and he walked faster and more steadily than he thought. How long has it been since she was able to carry the medicine box by herself to see the queen and the prince? His younger brother has been in the imperial hospital for so many years, and he was still serving as a deputy to the imperial doctor. After the imperial doctor quit the imperial hospital, he can treat the princes and princesses in the palace, but more for the dignitaries outside. See a doctor. If he wants to treat the queen or the crown prince, he may have to stay in the hospital for another 10 years before it is possible. But he is not too young. The Zheng family now has a few very good seedlings in the next generation, but unfortunately, they are not in their room, so he thought of letting his sons Zhenggu and Zhou Man learn a lesson. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1408. The Zheng family's medical skills are naturally very good, and the big shopkeeper Zheng is also willing to polish his son, and the little shopkeeper Zheng is not stupid, but it is very strange that his medical skills are not bad, but he is still a little worse. Not only imperial physician Zheng and shopkeeper Zhengde, but also Dr. Ding felt that shopkeeper Xiao Zheng could not prescribe independently. He is going on the road to a famous doctor, at least, he is also aiming at the position of the Taiyuan hospital, and his reputation must not be flawed. So I would rather not give him a prescription than let him treat the wrong person. Shopkeeper Zhengde felt that his temper was not stable enough, so he pressed him to take medicine on the counter, become a shopkeeper, and waited for his temper to stabilize before seeing a doctor. But after seeing Zhou Man, he doubted his judgment. To be stable, at such a young age, Zhou Man, who only reached their chest, is obviously not stable. He is full of emotions and anger, and he likes to squat on the edge of the door and watch the small restaurant diagonally opposite. It's not very suitable to sit in the hall for a doctor's judgment, but they just did a good job. So shopkeeper Zhengde felt that he was not very good at teaching disciples, so he wanted to put his son next to Man Bao. Everyone is mutually beneficial. The most important thing is that Zhou Man's medical skills are also very good, especially in the aspect of infertility. She is now recognized as the #1 person in the world. Don't look at the small number of people who usually come to see this area, but if you really make a sign, there will still be a lot of people watching. Shopkeeper Zhengde thought of the bright future in the future, and when he looked down at Man Bao again, he couldn't help but smile. His face was full of creases, and his voice was too pointed seductive. I have prepared everything for this kid. No, these 2 boys are ready for the apprenticeship ceremony. The hesitant man Bao's eyes lit up, and he nodded immediately. Okay, then it's better to hit the sun if you choose a day, just today. Shopkeeper Xiao Zheng, obviously it's a temporary idea. Where are you going to go to the apprentice ceremony? Xiao Xiao was also very uneasy. The shopkeeper didn't tell him that he would be apprenticing today. He even had old clothes, let alone the ceremony of apprenticeship. What are you doing today? Dr. Ding and the others strode in from the outside, only to hear Man Bao's last sentence. Seeing her, Dr. Ding and the others smiled, and took out a red envelope from their arms, and rushed to Man Bao and said, "Come on. Come, although it's the 20th of the first month, it's not bad to say goodbye to the old age." Man Baofa was very heartfelt, and immediately saluted several doctors. "Happy New Year, Dr. Ding, Happy New Year, Dr. Tao." All right," said a handful of older doctors in a good mood, stroking their beards and nodding, as they handed her the red envelopes they had prepared in their hands. Only then did the shopkeeper Zheng remember that the red envelope he had prepared had not been given out in time. He also coughed lightly, took out a red envelope from his arms, and gave it to Man Bao with a smile. "I also prepared a red envelope for Dr. Zhou Xiao." Seeing Zhou Liru beside him, he stretched out his hand and took out a red envelope from his son's arms, turned around and handed it to her, smiling, "There is one of yours too." Zhou Liru immediately saluted and paid New Year's greetings to the shopkeeper Zhengde. Shopkeeper Xiao Zheng stared, and shopkeeper Zhengde lowered his voice and said, "What kind of expression is this? Anyway, you don't need this red envelope anymore. Why, you still want to send a red envelope to your master?" Shopkeeper Xiao Zheng was speechless. Dr. Ding noticed Zhou Liru and asked, "This is?" Man Bao immediately introduced her, "This is my niece, Zhou Liru. She will follow me to study medicine in the future, so please take care of me." He asked Zhou Liru to call someone and introduce her to Dr. Ding. Doctors Ding touched their bodies, and there was no red envelope, so they could only temporarily take a handful of copper coins from the money bag to make her New Year's money. Shopkeeper Zhen waited for them to give the red envelopes before he mentioned asking them to testify. He raised his chin proudly and slightly reserved, and said humbly that Man Bao would accept disciples today. Of course, this is not the most important thing. The most important thing is that his son is also one of them, and he is also a senior brother. Dr. Ding opened their mouths wide, looked at Man Bao, and then looked at shopkeeper Xiao Zheng. They all subconsciously felt that Man Bao was tricked by shopkeeper Zhengde. But after holding it for a long time, the words that came out were, "What about the medicine cabinet? What does it matter? Just wait till I get home and choose one of my nephews to take care of." In the Zheng family, except for a few dudes who have no intention of learning medical skills, and some stupid people who can't learn how to do so, the others have started to memorize medicinal materials since they can speak, and they have started to recognize medicinal materials since they can remember. The Book of Enlightenment of others is 1,000 characters, and the Book of Enlightenment of theirs is Shennong's Materia Medica. So it's not difficult to find someone from the Zheng family to manage the medicine cabinet. Of course, as one of the most important pharmacies in the capital, it is not difficult for the small shopkeeper to find it casually. After the shopkeeper Zheng said that, he still needs to investigate carefully. But the most important thing at this moment is the matter of apprenticeship. The shopkeeper Zheng turned around and went to look for the apprenticeship ceremony. "I am afraid that other apprenticeships are hard to find, but this is a pharmacy, and the one who wants to worship is a doctor, and the reason is to study medicine. It is too simple." The shopkeeper Zhengde found a good wild ginseng from the pharmacy for the apprenticeship ceremony, and found a gift box for Zheng Xiao to put a box of bird's nest, and this was done. He handed the 2 boxes to his son behind him, and said, "It's all on my account." Shopkeeper Xiao Zheng took it and asked with a bitter face, "Dad, do you really worship? Weren't you smiling and happy when you were outside just now? That's for your face. I'm much older than Dr. Zhou Xiao. As a doctor, we don't look at age, but only on ability. In terms of age, Zhou Man is as old as an apprentice. Can he go to the palace to see a doctor? The shopkeeper Zheng patted him and said, don't you always want to sit in the hall? Prescription. This is your chance to see how Dr. Zhou Xiao does it and learn a little bit. Shopkeeper Xiao Zheng could only respond. He went out with the gift box, and it happened that Dr. Lu also arrived. Dr. Lu didn't expect that she would fall from the only disciple to the second child, but she glanced at Zheng Xiao who was beside her, and she didn't say anything. Xiao Xiao didn't have so many ideas, and he was foolishly happy. Although he could study medicine with Dr. Zhou Xiao before, it was different. There is no status, just an apprentice. Dr. Zhou Xiao may leave him at any time, but with the status of master and apprentice, it is different. He is very happy. Man Bao avoided people and quietly showed off to Sanya, seeing that, many people want to worship me as their teacher. Sanya nodded and whispered, I see, I will be as powerful as my aunt in the future. Man Bao whispered, you work hard, you are younger than them, and you are not stupid, you can definitely do it. Sanya was instantly confident. Taking advantage of the fact that there were no patients in front of him, Man Bao immediately sat down on the chair, and Dr. Ding joined in the fun to witness. Shopkeeper Xiao Zheng raised his teacup and knelt down first, bowed his head and offered tea respectfully, saying, please, master, use tea. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1409. Man Bao took the tea and took a sip. She touched her body, but found nothing, because she was about to hit the sun, so she didn't prepare a gift. After thinking about it, she opened the purse, took out a penny and placed it in the palm of the shopkeeper Xiao Zheng, smiling, I gave it to you, it's not a very precious thing, but it's worth a few years, I just learned medicine. I didn't think much about it when I was there, but my mother was not healthy, and it was too expensive to see a doctor and take medicine, and I knew some herbs, and I liked to go everywhere, so I learned medical skills. Although my mother finally recovered, there are many people in the world who are as sick as my mother, but there are always people who can't be cured, so I hope my medical skills can be very powerful, and I will be the same person as Bien Ke Hua Tuo in the future. Man Bao said, I hope you can become such a person in the future. Man Bao smiled and said, the medical skills are exquisite and the medical ethics are noble. As long as there is still one unsolved disease in the world, you should continue to study medical skills, and do not judge the disease with money. Although he found the two things that Man Bao said, especially the first one, it was difficult, but the shopkeeper Xiao Zheng bowed his head and accepted the copper coin in Man Bao's hand respectfully with both hands. The copper coin was tied up so that he would not accidentally spend it as ordinary copper coin. Zhenggu got up and gave the box containing ginseng to Man Bao as a teacher ceremony. He got up and stepped aside, and it was Dr. Liu's turn to kneel down. She also served tea and stuffed the jade pendant she had just picked up in her purse for Man Bao. Man Bao also gave her a copper coin and said the same thing again. Xiao Xiao followed and knelt down. After serving the tea, she took the copper coins from Man Bao. The shopkeeper Zhengde gave him the gift box containing the bird's nest. When it was Sanya's turn, she looked left and right, and found that she had nothing to give to the little ant, mainly because the little ant didn't tell her about it before she went out today, so she knelt down and discussed with the little ant, how about in the future? Do you leave me to comb your hair? Man Bao thought this was a good idea, so he nodded again and again. Her three brothers and sisters. It's so wrong. Zhenggu and Zhengxiao, we dare not even if we have the heart. The difference between men and women is Da Fang. Dr. Lu, it's really a mistake, it's time to move in with Dr. Zhou Xiao. Man Bao did not favor one over another, and also gave Sanya a copper plate. Sanya hesitated for a while holding the copper plate, and decided to ask Dr. Lu what they decided to do with the copper plate. If she accidentally spends it, what if their senior brothers and sisters are separated in the future, and what if they need copper coins to recognize their relatives? Although my sister-in-law's copper coin looks no different from other copper coins, she can't just pick out one and say it's this one, right? It seemed very dignified. After the apprenticeship was over, everyone had witnessed it, so they went to the front hall with a smile. Dr. Ding asked Man Bao with a smile, "How's this month going?" Man Bao nodded and said, "Not bad. What about Dr. Ding?" "It's no different from previous years, but this year's Lantern Festival's lights are not as good looking as in previous years." Man Bao, "I didn't watch." "It's okay, I didn't watch it this year, I'll watch it next year." Man Bao, "Maybe I won't be able to see it next year." Although the lanterns were beautiful, she had to go home to see her parents, otherwise she wouldn't go back once a year, and her parents and sister-in-law would definitely want to kill her. Man Bao was a little disappointed. Why do the lanterns have to be seen during the Lantern Festival, and can't be seen again on the 30th of the first lunar month? Dr. Tao, in addition to the Lantern Festival, don't there are lanterns on the Mid-Autumn Festival? I've never heard of lanterns on the 30th of the first lunar month. Man Bayadao, festivals are also invented by everyone, not since ancient times. The Mid-Autumn Festival lanterns are different from the Lantern Festival lanterns. I heard that there are more Lantern Festival lights, and the emperor in the palace will still stand on the tower. It will be rewarded with all the people. Dr. Ding, that's right, I pushed to the front this year, and I happened to see His Majesty. Hey, he is majestic. Man Bao didn't think the emperor was so powerful, but he still said, "I may not have seen the emperor for a long time." As soon as these words came out, several people choked up and didn't want to talk to her anymore. Dr. Ding turned his head and said to Dr. Tao and others, let's go to the doctor. Please." Seeing that they were all gone, Man Bao turned his head to Sanya and said, "Follow me in the consultation room in a while. Let's see how I treat people. When there are no more patients, I will take you to identify the medicinal materials." Then he said to Xiao Xiao, "Put out the sign for seeing a doctor." Xiao Xiao responded and hung the sign of Dr. Zhou Xiao on the door of the clinic. After a while, the patients who came to Jishitang for medical treatment saw the sign, and those who knew about it came over. When they didn't know, they asked, "I heard that it was a little genius doctor in the capital," and they followed suit. But when he opened the curtain and went in, seeing that Zhou Man was so young, he immediately backed out and rearranged the numbers of other doctors. Although I know that the little genius doctor may be a little small, it is too small. Man Bao handled the patients in an orderly manner, and only let Xiao Xiao and Lu Yunu follow the practice. As for Zhenggu, he consulted the pulse and consciously prescribed a prescription, but the shopkeeper Zhengda and Dr. Ding felt that the prescription he prescribed was not correct. Very good, lack of spirituality, so he is not allowed to prescribe. So he didn't follow Man Bao at this time, he was still picking medicine on the medicine cabinet. In the first month of the month, the cold was very stable these days, so there were not many patients, and the 4 doctors read the patients in less than an hour. But soon, someone came to invite Dr. Ding and Dr. Tao to see the doctor, and the 2 left with the medicine box. Man Bao and Dr. Gu stayed at the pharmacy. When there were no patients, they sat in the backyard to talk, and by the way, they talked about how to teach these 4 disciples. Mainly because their progress is different, too different. What Zhenggu lacked was the so-called spirituality, and Man Bao couldn't understand it for a while, so Dr. Gu explained to her, "This child's prescription is like memorizing a prescription. It's time to look directly below the crux." Man Bayadu looked confused, "Is this right?" After a pause, Dr. Gu said, That's right, that is, lack of spirituality. How can I say this? Forget it, wait for a patient to come, you can ask him to give you a few prescriptions to see. Dr. Gu took the tea that Xiao Xiao poured and said with a smile, but now there are few patients. After 2 months, the weather is changeable, and there are more patients when it is cold and hot. Shopkeeper Zhengde just checked the newly arrived medicinal materials today and confirmed that there is no quality problem. He just beat his lower back and nodded when he heard this. Yes, it's been too cold these days, and there is no sign of warming, so I'm sick. Not many people. Touching Zhou Liru's stunned expression on the side, shopkeeper Zhengde changed the subject and immediately said, but Kuotai Minan is a good thing. Dr. Gu immediately nodded and said repeatedly, yes, it's a good thing. Man Bao. Farmer's Blessed Girl. Author, Yu Yuzu. Chapter 1410. Zhenggu didn't have to worry about Man Bao for a while. Xiao Xiao was still specializing in one kind of disease and was not in a hurry, but it was Dr. Lu, who had a good foundation and intelligence, and needed to learn a lot from Man Bao. Man Bao took out the medical booklet copied by Bai Shan from the medicine box and handed it to her. This is what I wrote during the Chinese New Year. It's all the cases that I have sorted out. Man Bao concealed their names and everything related to their identities, only recorded their pulse records, then wrote down the method of diagnosis, and then wrote down the prescriptions she prescribed, and extended to 1 or 2 other prescriptions. Acupuncture needles used. You take it and make a copy, there are some I haven't finished, and you can copy it when I write it. This is a medical book. Several doctors stared at the medical book in Lu Yunu's hand with bright eyes, but they did not speak. Each family has medical books and medical books left by their ancestors in their hands, which are not easy for people to read. Moreover, they have always known Zhou Man. If they dared to ask to take a look at her medical book at this time, she would definitely ask to take a look at the treasure left by their ancestors. So wait. Dr. Ding and the others slanted their eyes to look at shopkeeper Zhengde. The shopkeeper Zhengde was a little uneasy, coughed lightly, and asked, Dr. Zhou Xiao, don't you want to teach Li Ru to recognize medicinal materials? Oh, yes, at present, Zhou Liru is the one who needs to worry most, because she is like a blank piece of paper, and she still doesn't know anything. The shopkeeper Zhengde said with a smile, it just so happened that a lot of new medicinal materials were delivered today. I just checked it and haven't allocated it yet. Why don't you teach her a point? Man Bao nodded and pulled Zhou Liru to identify the medicinal materials. She looked at Xiao Xiao and Lu Yunu, who were idle, and said, you two, come together. Many medicinal herbs have been included in the treasure, and many are already in the encyclopedia. When she first recognized the medicinal materials, as long as there were entries in the encyclopedia, she pulled out the entries, and the medical books taught by Drg. No together. Most of the medicines written are the same, but there will always be a few more entries in the entry. Man Bao knows that it is the effect that is discovered after the accumulation of time. Of course, it was impossible for Man Bao to remember everything clearly, her brain was not that powerful yet. She just memorized the most important medicinal properties and usage, and wrote down the rest in her notes. At this time, she felt in the medicine box. In fact, she found a thick book from the space. This book is different from what Lu Yingnu and the others have seen. The cover is very thick, and it looks like it is made of sheepskin to the naked eye. It looks expensive. Zhou Liru was very familiar with this book. When I was a child, my aunt went out to dig out the flowers and plants she liked, and soon after she came back, she would lay down on the desk and write down the appearance and medicinal properties of the flowers and plants in this book. According to my sister-in-law, this book was bought by her and a person who had the best relationship with her, and it was not expensive at all. The family guessed that the man was young Master Shan, because he was the only one who would sell such a precious thing to his aunt cheaply. Then the aunt specially baked a meat pie and asked my aunt to bring it to Master Shan. At that time, they were envious of Master Shan, because the meat pie was very white and meaty. Yes, that taste. It's no worse than the meat pie at Erhu Street in Mianzhou City, although the two meat pie are not the same. Thinking of this, Zhou Liru swallowed, turned his head and said to Man Bao, "Little aunt, I want to eat my aunt's meat pie." When Man Bao heard this, he was sad. She turned her head to look at Zhou Liru, and said righteously, "Don't mention sister-in-law here, especially when we are hungry." Zhou Liru nodded and admitted his mistake. Manager Zhengde. He said to the guy next to him, "Let the cook in the back cook bake the meat pie, and we will eat the meat pie at noon today." Dr. Gu, forgive me, the cook's patties, his stomach is a little uncomfortable. Man Bao coughed lightly, took the book and let Zhou Liru recognize it first. She picked up a sliced rhizome and asked, "Do you know what this is?" Zhou Liru shook his head. Man Bao put it under his nose first, "Smell it, guess it." Zhou Liru, "It's quite fragrant, with the smell of fragrance, but aunt, how can you guess, when you called me back the name of the medicine, you didn't tell me what the medicine looked like." "This is astragalus, you are so stupid, this is in the medicine my mother takes." "Come, take a look at it carefully, and write it down." Sanya looked at it and nodded, "Write it down." Man Bao didn't need to turn over the book, he told her directly, "This astragalus is sweet and slightly warm, you should know this. People are divided into yin and yang, and this medicine is also divided into yin and yang. Yin is divided into cool and cold, and yang is also divided into mild and hot. It belongs to the lung, spleen, liver, and kidney meridians, and can be used for spontaneous sweating due to deficiency of yin, night sweats due to deficiency of yin, as well as edema due to nephritis due to insufficient yang qi, ulceration of sores, and weakness of qi deficiency." Wait, Mr. Zheng," the shopkeeper heard sweat on his forehead. Seeing that not only Zhou Liru had stars in his eyes, but also Xiao Xiao and Lu Yunu, who were not weak, couldn't keep up, so he interrupted her quickly. "Dr. Zhou Xiao, do you teach your children to recognize medicinal materials like this?" Man Bao said as a matter of course, "Yes, that's what Dr. G recognized when he brought me to recognize the medicinal materials, and I haven't said how to concoct them." Shopkeeper Lao Zhang finally knew why Dr. G couldn't bring out a good student in Yizhu for so many years, and the only one he brought out was Zhou Man, who was not his student. With luck, the shopkeeper Lao Zhang suddenly didn't want to say anything to Zhou Man's gaze. He simply turned his head and asked Zhou Liru, "Do you understand?" Zhou Liru shook his head very simply, then nodded again, and whispered, "This medicine is called astragalus." Shopkeeper Zhengde clapped his hands and said, "Yes, you just need to remember that this is called astragalus." Unable to see, he pulled Man Bao and waved his hand unceremoniously, "Come on, students, don't teach like this, you see me teach her." Shopkeeper Zhengde turned his head, smiled at Zhou Liru, pointed to astragalus and said, "Remember, this is astragalus, this is called bifoling, this is Beizu, this is Huanglian, this is Hu Huanglian, Changsong, Tianma." The shopkeeper Zheng said the same, and Zhou Liru followed. After he taught her to recite all the new herbs that came today, he tested her from the beginning. After going back and forth 3 times, Zhou Liru actually wrote down most of the names. Shopkeeper Zhengde couldn't help but look at Man Bao, then at Zhou Liru, stroking his beard and praising, yes, as expected of a family, indeed smart." Man Bao endured it, but couldn't hold back. "Do you only teach the medicinal materials to recognize the names, but not the properties and usage?" Shopkeeper Zhengde almost ripped off his beard. He said, "You have to eat one bite at a time, and you have to walk step by step. How can you ask people to write down so many things as soon as you come up?"